All right, folks, this is Jeremiah Stillings, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my belief of programming being a trade skill. Um, so, when a person wants to learn a trade skill, they don't usually typically go to school. They may go to a vocational technical school that teaches them the basic principles of what the trade is, but normally they just kind of start in the career field and they learn from the people that are hired them. So my kind of belief is that programming really, with how fast it changes, doesn't need to be a computer science 4 year degree. It doesn't need to be a engineering degree. It needs to be a hands-on, learn what the heck you can learn as fast as you can learn it, because the next week it's going to change. So that said, 2018 has this thing out there called Visual Studio 2017 Community. And if you want to learn how to program, and you want to learn how to program in something called C Sharp, you're going to be using this tool. Now, if you do a quick search on the internet on how to program, or C Sharp tutorials or YouTube it, you're going to get a lot of crap. And it's all old. Every bit of it's old. So today is a little blurb from me to try to get new people that want to program as a trade skill into programming. And we're going to start here, and I'm just going to keep talking as I type. So we're going to start with Visual Studio. Okay, and we're just going to search the word Visual Studio. And I don't type real well because my brain don't work all the time. We're going to click the top link here, okay? And I'm going to kind of go a little fast, but a little slow too. You can click that if you want, but most people click it over here for Community 2017. This is a free one. These are down here where you have to pay. So you click that bad boy, and depending on how fast your internet is, of course, they want me to take a survey. And thanks, Microsoft. I'll take it later. And then you're going to get this click once little thing. It's a deployment. This is how Microsoft software is now deployed. We're going to click once.exe. So you're going to click it. It's going to open up. And of course, you're going to have to allow it with your user account control. Okay. So we're going to install it. And what it's doing is it installs something really, really quick. And what it's actually doing in the background is going out to where the versioning is for Visual Studio, and it is downloading the most current version of Visual Studio, and it's installing it right now. And what it's installing is just the installer. So when this installer opens up, we're going to see an entire vast realm of options. And these options are going to be confusing for anybody that's not a programmer. In the past, when you used to set up tools to program with, you just could next all the way through everything. Well, not Visual Studio. Visual Studio and the way we program nowadays in C Sharp is all with something called microservices. And this is kind of like a term that's not real well defined on the internet right now. Some people call them NuGet packages. But basically, every single one of these things right here is components. And you can think of it however you want to, but you're installing a tool that uses little modules to allow you to do things. So this particular screen, when you load up here, it's going to say workloads at the top. It's going to say individual components, language packs, and installation locations. Now, it says right now with absolutely nothing checked, it's going to take 596 megabytes. And that's kind of big, but not really. Not in today's experience. So we're going to go through a little bit about what this is. So this particular one right here is Universal Windows Platform Development. It says create applications for the Universal Windows Platform with Visual C Sharp, Visual Basic, C Sharp, Visual Basic, JavaScript, or optionally C++. This says get everything you need to run and build apps on Windows 10 device family. And most people are like, well, what do I pick? What do I install? So there's a couple different philosophies on this. Some of the older guys that have been in the trade skill for a long time, they only pick this one. And for years, C Sharp has been this rock. And we used to build Windows Forms applications and Windows Console applications. And that still works today. Problem is, you gotta market it and sell it yourself. Now, these universal Windows platform development, that allows you to publish to this little fancy thing. So there's this thing called Microsoft Store. Every single thing in this Microsoft Store is a universal Windows platform software, or has been ported from the desktop to here. One of my favorite ones is Notepad++, which is an unofficial copy of a port, but we use that all the time at work. So unless it's here, it's really hard to market. And as you can see, I mean, this guy here is charging $34.99 for his software. So if you're a beginning programmer and you've got a great idea, you're going to check this button. Now, just because you may want to develop something later, we're going to check this button here. Now, if you don't know the difference between C# and C++, you're going to quickly see that there's something completely different right here. And this is, I'm not going to say the word ancient because people still use this. But if you're a new programmer, skip it for now, okay? Now, what we're going to talk about next is something really weird. These little buttons right here says web and cloud. Everybody's heard of the internet, which they call the web. Everybody has kind of heard that the internet is hosted on the cloud. But what you don't really realize is how the people write the programs that put them there. You have to use certain tools, or in this particular case, NuGets or components that are installed in your IDE to program. So what we're going to do here is we're going to click this ASP.NET in web development. We're going to click that one. And this ASP, someone's going to correct me, I know, but it used to stand for Application Service Products. And that was like the original thing. And the Application Service Product was this concept way back then when it first came out, that we're going to take all of the logic, the business value logic, and we're going to put it on our server. And then we're going to have every single client access the server, which is a whole lot more powerful, allow it to do the logic and spit out a result to the client. And that's kind of what it was. And we've kind of hem-hawed back and forth between whether or not we're doing business logic on the front end, or which would be your clients, or on the back end, which would be your stuff like PHP and ASP.NET and things like that. But the general idea is you don't want your browser doing a lot of work. You just want it displaying stuff. That makes it fast. So we're going to click this button right here, right there, and then we're going to also click this, because not in this video, but in a later video, we're going to start using some Azure development. And Azure is Microsoft's answer to cloud computing, and how it's going to deliver your application via its click once to the clients through the web stored on the cloud. So we're going to click that bad boy. All right, and now this little guy right here, that sounds pretty neat, right? Data storage and processing. Connect, develop, and test data solutions with SQL Server, Azure Data Lake, or Hadoop. Now, I'm not a smart man. I have no idea what Hadoop is. Not a clue in the world. I recognize what SQL is. I recognize what Data Lake is. But I also recognize what data storage and processing means. So basically, if your application is going to need a database, it'd be a good idea to check this button. So we're going to check it. Some of these guys over here, these are data science applications, very, very niche. Unless you're doing that type of programming, you probably don't need that. If you're doing Python, you can check that, but we're going to start this little tutorial in C#, and Python is a different language, so we don't need that one right now. And the Node.js, this is one of them things that's a newer technology, like past couple years, and JavaScript's been out for a very long time, but now they're starting to create entire frameworks in order to handle the business logic on the client end, and that's a little crazy. And so what the deal is these particular guys, these nodes and stuff, Node, React, all that stuff, that JavaScript framework doesn't really sit no longer on your computer in your browser. It sits on the server, does some stuff, and spits out some output. So it's kind of like an in between, really. Your browser's still going to have to run a lot of JavaScript running that stuff, but your server's still going to have to work pretty hard. We're going to leave that unchecked right now for what we're doing. This Office SharePoint, we're not doing anything with Office or SharePoint. SharePoint is kind of a dying dinosaur for Microsoft. Everything that I've heard or been told is that all the developers for SharePoint are now moving on because there's only a couple hundred people that that were using it still. So this down here is pretty cool. So mobile development with .NET. So it's got this little feature that if you didn't scroll down, you would think you could universal, it would work anywhere, right? But this is just for Windows, okay? And all your little cell phones and stuff, they work on iOS or Android or Windows, which I think they killed that program by now. But so the deal is, you can click this with Xamarin, and it'll install something to port your .NET code to a cross-platform application. So we're going to click that for just future use. This other stuff here is for doing video game designs, and this stuff here is for using Apache Cordova, which came out, I believe, before the Xamarin. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I've heard of this one before I heard of this one, so that should tell you something. And so that's kind of all we're going to need for right there. But now, notice this says Android and iOS and UWP, but right here, or cross-platform for iOS, Android, and Windows. But down here, it says .NET Core cross-platform development. What does all that mean? Well, they got some pretty cool stuff now, where .NET Core, which is a subset of the full version of .NET, allows you to just pick the modules you want to use, and it's going to install on much simpler devices. Like part of the big problem with programming in .NET and C# is a lot of those things can't be sent out to a little tiny wristwatch that's got 4K of memory. So this particular deal here is going to allow you to select the different things that you want to use for whatever you're programming, whatever your device is. We're going to click that too, just to set it up properly. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of stuff, and down here you're going to see this .NET Core 1.0 to 1.1. That's ancient. Don't check that box ever, unless you already have developed something in Core 1.0 or 1.1. Just make sure you got a Core 2.2 up here, and make sure you got a 4.6 framework. And then you're going to hit the install button, and it's going to take a while, so I'm going to pause it. And as this is installing, I realize I ramble and I kind of talk a little slow with a little slurred speech. So if you really want to, you can put this on 2x speed and make me sound a little more intelligent. I usually watch everybody's videos on 2x speed anyway. Okay guys, so Visual Studio finally finished installing, and the neat thing about those click once installs is you should have a pretty current version of Visual Studio. I got a couple little flags up here on the notifications tab, so I'm going to click it and see what it says. And these basically say it's got a couple updates, okay? So if we want to update Visual Studio is not built like in part of Windows Update. So the way we update the actual IDE is to go to Tools, and then Extensions and Updates. And we're going to have to just click the Updates button. And so we'll just run through here real quick, and it shouldn't take but a couple seconds. So we'll quickly do this, and we'll update it. That way we got the most recent stuff. And so that's pretty much done. Now notice down here, it says the modifications will begin when all Studio windows are closed. Okay, so I'm going to take this opportunity to close it and restart it. So we're just going to type in Visual Studio again right here and pop it back up. And as you can see, all that stuff I just installed is kind of installing in the background. That's what it's doing. We're back in Visual Studio now, and I don't have any more flags. It should be all my updates are done. What we're going to show you now is how to do a UWP application. And your start page right here is pretty cool. So you can actually open or hit new project or whatever you want to do. But I'm going to show you the menu system for this instead. So we're going to go to File and then New and then Project. And then it's going to load up a little like a wizard almost, if you remember the old days. As it loads this, you're going to see a couple really weird things. You remember we didn't install C++ option? It's still there. So we're going to click the C# because that's what we want to learn today. And this is everything we've got installed. So when you get to this point, you have to ask yourself what we're going to be using, what we're going to do. So when you look at this, Windows Desktop is what most of the developers would do for a standalone program. And of course you got your Windows format on the .NET framework, and that's pretty much a standard go-to for almost everybody that does standalone stuff. So what we're looking at is a Windows Universal, okay? And now this says a project for a single page universal Windows platform app that has no predefined controls or layout. Sounds pretty blank, right? There's another thing down here I want to focus your attention on: Windows Application Packaging Project. So what this is, a project that creates packages containing Windows applications for side loading or distribution with the Windows Store. That kind of sounds like something we want to do because we want to market whatever we're going to build. And but before we click any buttons here, I want to direct your attention to this little thing that says Web. And this is a little drop down, okay? And it says .NET Core. And this is where we're going to take a little detour right now to explain a little bit about how this works. .NET Core is this particular set of standards. So Microsoft published this back in September, it looks like, and they basically came out and said what .NET Core is and what .NET Standard is. And if you look at all this stuff, the .NET framework, this is the old, okay? This is what you work with, the Windows forms and everything else in your console and your old ASP.NET. And then you got console in .NET Core, and you got ASP.NET Core. So what's the difference between ASP.NET Core and .NET Core? So I have to sit there and kind of think about that a little bit. These particular things up here are your models and how the applications are built or your framework. These particular things down here are your libraries that it references. So this is your general heading, and then this is what it would access. But for these particular Windows Universal apps, they don't use either one of that. What they use right now, and I'm going to scroll down here and try to find it. There it is. They use .NET Standard, and this is a really confusing thing. It's used for building all libraries that can be referenced from all .NET implementations, such as .NET Framework, .NET Core, and Xamarin. So this is what a UWP uses on the build section. The debug section, believe it or not, still uses .NET Core because they think it's faster. So they're still working on that, and that may not always be the case, but right now it is. But it uses .NET Standard. So when people actually think about making a UWP and they're like, can I make a UWP in .NET Core? The answer is actually no. You cannot. You have to use .NET Standard as of today, 7/12/2018. And .NET Standard is compatible with .NET Core 2.0. And the reason that's important is because, as you will see, the .NET Core is used for building applications in the web applications and cloud services. So we're going to roll back in here, and we're just going to look at this .NET Core, and you can see there is no there's no universal Windows application template for it. So we're going to click this .NET Standard, and like that thing said right there in that little walkthrough from Microsoft that says it's used to build libraries. So there it is. So you can get really confused really quick right there, and all that other stuff is just extra stuff for you to work with later. So we're just going to roll back up here to Universal right here, and we're going to play around a little bit because we can build a blank app, but that's really not what we want. We kind of want it something we can push to the store. So we're going to click on this one. All right, and this little button down here is something really complex with a whole nother set of lessons. That's going to add either Git or your particular Visual Studio. Can't remember what it's called, but there's actually its own versioning inside of Visual Studio. So if I go up here to like project, or team rather, this particular little dude, there it is. That's what it's called, Visual Studio Team Services. So what this is like your click once. It's like your click once stuff, and it does full deployment of your software, and very good to use. That is a complete another rabbit hole we'll have to dive down later, but that's what that little button right there is. So we're not going to use versioning for ours right now with Git or with Visual Studio Team Services. So we'll just go back to that screen, and we'll just come back in here to C#, and we'll pick Universal right there, and we'll hit this, and we're just gonna pick this right here, and let's find a funny name. So what should our app be? Funny app. That's real generic. There you go. So it's going to load up. And now this is what's really important. Okay, in order for a Universal Windows Platform application or project to use the .NET Standard library, you have to have a minimum version of Windows 10 Creators Update. Okay, and then your target version is going to be 1803. So you can go back farther, but if you go back farther, you won't have access to that library. So actually, I think it's the fall creators it has to be, to tell you the honest to that truth. So we're going to pick that one as the minimum version is the false creator. And of course, they put you a nice little thing right here to tell you a little bit about it. So if you read it, must have a minimum of 16229. So we'll roll back in here. 16229, yeah, so the fall creators is the minimum, and this is the most current one as of today's date. So we're gonna hit OK, and this is pretty cool, guys, because it's gonna build everything in. We used to call it scaffolding back in the day, and I don't know where that term came from. I kind of picked it up over the years. I don't remember which language used it, but it was called scaffolding. And this particular little funny app we just created, believe it or not. So we're going to get back out of the team. We're going to go to the Solution Explorer. Okay, so this is my application packaging right here, and it starts out with a window screen, and this is, you can click every single one of these and read about it. And this right here is kind of what you want to do, because if you're going to ever push something to the store, this is how you want to do it. You don't want to add all this stuff in NuGets and have to do it all by yourself. So basically, here we are. This is our application, but we don't have an application in here, and all we've got is connected services and that. But this is like a shell. This is like your like, if you guys remember a long time ago, there was like when you double click the Logitech mouse driver, it would open up this installer. Well, this is kind of like how it would package it for the web deployment on Azure or on your store. So this particular guy right here doesn't have a application in it. So what we actually have to do here is we're going to come over here to use Windows Template Studio, and we're going to just click that button, and it's going to roll up. And go. All right. So how do you install it, right? Well, it's got a little link here, so let's click it and see what happens, shall we? So yeah, that would be the correct way to install it, is to download it off the marketplace. And then why it's not actually in NuGet, I'm not sure. So we're gonna double click this bad boy. So the deal is we're gonna come up here and hit save all first, and then we're gonna hit close. And now that it's closing, this Visual Studio extension installer will allow us to install, and so there it goes. Why Microsoft didn't make this easier or built into a different type of installer, I'm not exactly sure. I think they give developers a little bit too much credit these days for knowing what they want to do. So I'm going to pause it again while it does this. Alright, so it says it's done, and we're going to go back to Visual Studio and kick it back open. And again, I'm not on a speed demon computer or a workstation. This is just a very, very cheap computer, so I'll keep talking while you guys are watching my computer chug. Alright, so it opened it back up, and we're going to go ahead and open up our source project, SL.sln. I'm not sure what the .sln stands for, but that's what you have to open in Visual Studio to load your projects. Okay folks, so you're all going to laugh at me, okay? So, believe it or not, out of the box, you got one template, and that's the first thing we installed down here. This funny app inside was the one-page template. So what we got to do to correct my retardedness is hit the remove button on this, and we're going to take that out. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our shell again, which is luckily we did that way. We're going to come over here to hit add, and then a new project. And check this out. That added the template studio right here. So that is where it's at. And we're going to go ahead and pick this. And we're going to say, alright, we're going to call this funny app. And I'm not sure it's going to take it again because we may have a folder still named that. But we'll see. Alright, so that's really odd. Why is it targeting a framework for .NET Framework instead of .NET Standard right there? Very, very strange, Microsoft. So we're going to leave it at its default there and hit OK. Ah, yeah, see, I thought I may have still had the same folder name. So we'll have to go funny app inside too. Okay, this is how we program. We learn and keep going. Holy crow, look at this. This is a pretty wild deal. Oh, we're going to download some more stuff and install. Okay. So, I wonder how many gigs I've used on my computer today just installing all this stuff. I'll check that later. So, still rolling. Y'all getting bored, I know. And you're like, this guy doesn't know shit. Yeah. And that's what trade skill people do. They stumble through until they have a success. And if you give up now and you say, hey, I never got to make that universal Windows platform app, then you're only cheating yourself. But if you stick with it and you keep learning by stumbling through, and pretty soon you'll be that trade skill master trying to teach somebody else. Part of the issue and why everything is so hard to teach is because Microsoft literally pushes changes every couple of weeks, and where the menus were last week may not be where the menus are this week. Alright, so what do we want? Do we want a navigation pane, a blank, or a pivot and tabs? Well, I kind of really like the pivot and tabs, so we're going to click that one, okay? And then we're going to click down here to the design pattern, and now this gets a little crazy. So so there's something called code behind, and I'm going to click the details on it. And if you developed in WinForms, you feel comfortable with style development, this could be a great option for you. But it doesn't really tell you anything, right? It doesn't tell you what it is. This is the normal standard how it works with XAML. This is what the default is, so to speak. There is a whole bunch of other frameworks out there that are built for XAML that you can install, but you'd have to take another rabbit hole to learn it all. So we're going to just use code behind. And then over here, This is neat. So, oh wow, I can add all this stuff, right? Jeremiah, this ain't programming. This is dang button clicking. Are you serious? So we're gonna add a camera, okay? And we're going to add the image gallery. And I have no idea what the heck I'm even building yet. But for right now, we've got media gallery, we've got images, we've got a camera. Let's throw that on there for settings, just in case we want to change anything. And this is going to set up the templates for all those pages. And you're going to be like, what? But yeah, it really will. And then you come in here, and you can actually send your, I can't say that word, but analytics, how do you say it? You can do all these different things right here, web to app link, and pretty cool stuff. So this one right here, simple search, you can hook it to a handle when a user leaves and returns to the app to help you bring back your app back to a state as before. This is kind of like one of them deals where a lot of people don't talk about, but this is needed. If you leave your app running in the background when people aren't actually tabbed into it, that's kind of like bad practice. So we're going to click U for suspend and resume. And setting storage, what's this about? Simplifying storage data inside your application data folder. Oh, that's weird. Well, if you want to do background tasks, this is the button you would click to create that page. If you want to share, that's what you have to do here to share your app and your target. And these are cool, man. I love toast notifications. And yeah, you know how them things always pop up and says, you know, you got something right here. That's where those go. So if you want your app to send those right there for a computer, you can click that bad boy. Pretty cool. Yeah, did it click? Oh, it did. Yeah, I got yours. Azure notifications. If you're doing stuff on the hub on the cloud, you can click that. Live tile. This is kind of neat. Like when you click this button here, these are all considered live tiles from their Windows Metro interface back in, I think it's 8, and nobody really liked them, and I don't really know why they still have them, but if you're into that sort of thing, you can add that live tile if you want. So this is kind of cool. This will add if you do an update or a push, this is your telling your user, hey, this is what's new, this is what I fixed, so don't be pissed off because I already fixed what's broke. So this is drag and drop feature, and this inside of a standard wrapper. So my understanding of this particular thing is, we're just going to talk a little bit about it. Create drag and drop ready apps as well as the following framework pattern by your app. Okay, so that sounds really interesting. What does it do, guys? I don't understand. Use this service, validate your drag and drop area. So are you telling me that I'll be able to drag a picture into my media gallery? Is that what you're telling me? Yeah, that's kind of what it says it does. So we're gonna use that. Why not, right? So that sounds like something cool we can do. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's too hard to push the button, so we'll just do that. And then the feedback hub link, that's pretty standard for any app you publish. People want to be able to leave you feedback, tell you if you're good or bad or you're not good. If you want to talk to your people or whoever you sold your app to, saying thanks for purchase, you can do a first run prompt. And that's pretty much the features right there. But as you can see, this lined up a whole bunch of stuff, and it's pretty dang cool. So we're going to hit create. And this is going to create my project up in here underneath my solution, which is, again, ready to publish. And I'm going to pause it while it's making this. Okay, so it's done scaffolding, as I call it. And we're gonna just look at what all it installed. It installed a lot of stuff. Camera control, event handlers. Wow, it installed a whole lot. So, styles. Bunch of views. Oh, look at that. These are all pages. Oh, that's pretty neat, huh? So let me show you how this little thing works. Believe it or not, your app is ready to run. So we can click local machine right here, and it's going to take a second to build and compile, but because C# is not a on-the-fly compile. It compiles in the background and runs a file. So it's going to run here in just a second. Hey, check it out, guys. See how it says deploy started right here? This is neat because it's literally taking the app that it built with you just clicking buttons, and it is creating a click once, and it's installing it on your local computer, and it's going to run it. And I'm going to show you the power of what it just did. So we just got funny app inside too, right? And it says it's running. And this is just a splash screen, and I don't have a graphic set right now, so that's just the default. But normally your graphic would show up or whatever you want your splash screen. And check that out, man. Hey, we got toast notifications already. Holy crap, we got a welcome message with the standard French stuff that no one can ever read about this is dummy text. So, oh, that's pretty cool, right? So, hold on a second. Let's check this out. So, as a universal Windows app, when we install these things, like, there's two ways on Windows 10 to uninstall software or install software. So you can go into the control panel normally, and you can uninstall a program. But a program is not a universal Windows app. So what I'm about to show you is add or remove programs right here. And you notice this is different. This is a different section of Windows, right? So what in the world? Where did that come from? And what was my program right? Funny app. Okay. So we're gonna roll on down here to the F's. Holy crow! I've got a published piece of software already installed. If I ever want to move it or uninstall it, all I do is hit that button. So literally, you have just created your first app with a bunch of clicks and zero programming. Now, if you don't feel accomplished yet, let's go back to the app and take a look at what this thing does. So here's your main page, and we didn't put anything on it. So we're going to go to the camera. And I don't have a one of those fancy cameras attached to my computer, but if I did, I would be able to select the source right here and click it. The image gallery, basically I went to the image gallery, and apparently when the default video was loaded into the media player, that just started playing, and it kind of scared me a little bit. I kind of thought that it was running in the browser somewhere. But this is just the media player in the Channel 9, which is your Microsoft News. I was trying to turn it off, but didn't know where it was. So that's kind of cool. So we got a full-blown media player inside of our app. Even with the new debugger set to the release, we're having an issue with the media player auto-playing. So all you had to do was just open up this media player page right here. And down here in the example, actually CSS, so to speak, I guess you would call it. These are where you program the stuff. And see how it says true right here for autoplay? So all we're going to do is we're just going to turn this to false so I can actually talk while this app is running. And you can scroll through here a little bit, and you can see there's not a whole lot of data on how it's doing that, right? Like, where's it getting that thing from? And that's the beauty of it. So we're going to click down here. We're going to click this example.cs, which is actually your code. And we're just going to kind of cruise through here because it's pulling the file from somewhere. So the question is, where are we getting the thing from? Hey, look at that. There's the default source, and there's the image that's going to be displayed in a JPEG for what it's going to be while it's not playing. So we can change this to anything we want. I mean, this is just a web call, really. And we can change that to anything. You can put a YouTube video in there or whatever you want to, okay? So pretty dang neat how that works. So right now we've got a running application, and what do we click, guys? What, 6, 7, 8 buttons? Sometimes you just need to get out there and become a tradesman and get in and start playing with the tools. If they get to actually start seeing stuff built and running, it really piques their interest because they're like, hey, I did that. How can I make it do what I want to do? And that's where the learning is going to come in. So in the next set of the series, we're going to take this little app that we just built right here. We're going to add a database to it, and we're going to do it in probably Azure. So thanks for tuning in. I know this video is really long. Thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully you're smart. Put it on 2 times speed.